Walls are meant to protect us, to keep the outside world out, and to shelter us from danger. But what if the true threat was already inside? What if someone, or something, was living in your walls? Today, we're diving into 3 terrifying encounters with people living in the walls, true horror stories that will make you question every creak, every whisper, every flicker of movement in your home. These aren't just urban legends or ghost stories. These are true scary horror stories, real accounts of people who discovered they weren't alone, and hadn't been for a long time. If you love creepy stories, haunted tales, and paranormal encounters that crawl under your skin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because these chilling narratives might just keep you up tonight. Let's begin, if you dare. This story is about the crawlspace. Ashley had just moved into her first apartment, a small, older unit tucked between 2 brick buildings in upstate New York. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The rent was cheap, the neighbors kept to themselves, and she loved the vintage feel of the place. But almost immediately, something felt off. At night, she'd hear scratching behind the walls. Not like rats or mice, this was slower. Deliberate. Almost human. At first, she blamed it on old pipes or poor insulation. But then came the whispers. She'd be lying in bed when a faint voice would murmur her name from inside the wall next to her headboard. It was so quiet she thought she was imagining it. Then came the tapping. 3 taps. Always 3. And always from the same spot behind the drywall. One night, Ashley woke up unable to move. Sleep paralysis gripped her. She lay there, frozen, eyes wide open, heart pounding. And then she saw it. A pale, gaunt eye, staring at her through a crack in the wall. The eye blinked once, slowly, before retreating into the darkness. She screamed the moment her body could move again. Maintenance checked the apartment the next morning and claimed there was no crawlspace behind that wall, just insulation. They patched it up and left. But the whispers returned. The tapping never stopped. Finally, Ashley decided to investigate on her own. She pulled back the drywall and discovered a narrow, dark passage. Inside, she found food wrappers, children's toys, a stained mattress, and a journal. The entries were unsettling, page after page of obsessive ramblings about Ashley, what she wore, what she ate, who she called. Someone had been living inside her walls for weeks, maybe longer. She called the police. They searched the building but never found the man. He was simply gone. But even now, years later, Ashley says she still hears tapping in the night. Still wakes up frozen, locked in sleep, stories of a ghostly eye staring back at her. She believes he's still out there, maybe still watching. Maybe inside someone else's walls. Over time, Ashley's nightmares intensified. In her dreams, she'd find herself inside the walls, crawling through tight, claustrophobic tunnels while hearing whispers all around her. She began to recognize the voice in her dreams. It was deeper now, more distorted, as if it were speaking from another realm. The voice always said the same thing. "You let me in. I never left." She brought in a paranormal investigator, who detected cold spots and unusual EMF spikes throughout the apartment, especially near the wall by her bed. They described the energy as unsettlingly intelligent, something that wasn't just residual, but interactive, something capable of watching, learning, and manipulating. It wasn't just a squatter, it might be something darker, something paranormal. Soon after, Ashley began experiencing more paranormal encounters. Doors opened on their own. Her phone would ring in the middle of the night from unknown numbers, playing static and breathing on the other end. She even started waking up with scratches on her arms, thin, straight lines, as if made by a fingernail dragging across her skin while she slept. Her therapist blamed it on stress and sleep disorders. But Ashley knew better. These weren't just dreams. The presence in the wall hadn't left. It had attached itself to her, leaving a trail of haunted memories and dark secrets in its wake. She could feel its paranormal grip, not just on the apartment, but on her soul. To this day, she refuses to live alone. Every apartment she tours, she checks the walls. She knocks, listens. She makes sure there are no hollow sounds, no crawlspaces, no ways in. But even with others around, she still hears the ghostly whispers sometimes, murmurs in the quiet moments between sleep and wakefulness. And always, always, the same message. 3 taps. Then silence. Then breathing. Because sometimes the scariest true horror stories aren't about what comes through your door. They're about what's already inside. This story is about the Thin Man. Jacob was hired to renovate an old Victorian home in Oregon. The property had been abandoned for decades and was rumored to be haunted. The floorboards creaked like voices, the walls were warped, and cold air moved through the rooms like ghostly whispers. But Jacob didn't believe in the paranormal. He chalked up every strange occurrence to bad plumbing or structural decay. Until he opened the wall in the second-floor bedroom. Behind the panel was a space, no bigger than a coat closet, but inside was a man. He was tall, emaciated, covered in filth. His skin was pale, his eyes dark and sunken. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He simply looked at Jacob and said, "You weren't supposed to find me yet." The man was arrested, and police began their investigation. What they found in that house would make headlines for months. The Thin Man, as the press dubbed him, had been living inside the walls for over 10 years. He created an elaborate system of tunnels between rooms. He'd spy on tenants, steal food, watch them sleep. Some victims reported seeing shadows move, hearing paranormal sounds, and waking up to find their belongings rearranged. The true horror came when authorities linked the man to multiple disappearances in the area. He hadn't just been watching. He had been waiting. And Jacob? He couldn't shake the memory. He began having nightmares, hearing the man's voice whispering to him in the dark. His tools would disappear, only to reappear days later in odd places. He even began to experience sleep paralysis, where he saw a ghostly hand reaching out from inside the walls to touch his chest. He eventually quit contracting altogether. The trauma was too much. To this day, he swears that what he encountered wasn't just a man. It was something haunted, something that had lived in those walls long before anyone ever moved in. And it might still be there. The house was later inspected by paranormal investigators who detected extreme fluctuations in electromagnetic fields throughout the walls, as well as whispers caught on tape, voices pleading, warning, and sometimes laughing. One investigator even claimed to be pushed down the stairs by an invisible force, reporting an overwhelming sense of being watched throughout the visit. They called it one of the most chilling paranormal encounters of their careers. Jacob began receiving anonymous letters in the mail, old, yellowed envelopes with no return address. Inside were scribbled notes in a jagged hand, saying things like, "I still see you," and "The walls remember." He changed his phone number, moved to a new town, but the letters kept coming. One even arrived taped to the inside of his window. He began having vivid sleep stories, where he'd walk through tight, rotting corridors while hearing someone dragging themselves just behind him. The paranormal grip on his mind grew stronger each night, the dreams more real, more suffocating. He could smell the mildew, feel the nails scraping the inside of the walls as if someone were still crawling, still alive, just beneath the surface. Authorities never determined how the Thin Man had survived for so long or where he came from. But what disturbed investigators the most were the hundreds of crude drawings found behind the walls, portraits of every tenant who had ever lived there, their eyes scratched out, their mouths stitched closed with ink. There were even drawings of people who had never lived in the house, people like Jacob. Some believe the Thin Man wasn't just a recluse or predator. Some think he was part of something older, something tied to the house itself, a curse, a spirit, or something worse. One local called it the wall watcher, a presence that had haunted the property since the 1800s, feeding off fear, isolation, and madness. Jacob never returned to the job site. He never took another contract again. He now lives alone, with soundproof insulation and no drywall. Just concrete, thick, solid, cold. He sleeps with the lights on, a crowbar next to his bed, and white noise blaring to block out the ghostly whispers that still echo in his mind. Because sometimes, what we uncover in the walls is more than just dark secrets. Sometimes, the wall doesn't just hide things. It keeps them alive. This story is about Room 6. Claire was a hotel maid, used to cleaning up after messy guests and dealing with the occasional odd situation. But Room 6 at the old roadside inn where she worked was different. No one stayed there for long. Guests would check out in the middle of the night, complaining of strange noises, chilling sensations, and the feeling of being watched. Management wrote it off as superstition. Until Claire decided to clean it alone one evening. The room looked normal at first glance. But as she stripped the sheets, she heard a faint cough. It came from the wall near the headboard. She froze. Then she heard it again. She pressed her ear to the wall. Breathing. Someone was breathing inside the wall. She ran to her supervisor, who told her the building had hollow walls due to poor construction and not to worry. But Claire couldn't let it go. Later that night, she returned with a flashlight and a crowbar. She pried open a weak panel behind the wardrobe. What she saw made her vomit. Inside was a man, filthy, naked, shaking. He had been living between the walls of the hotel for months. Surveillance footage later revealed that he would crawl out through vents at night, watching guests as they slept, even lying under their beds. When police investigated, they found multiple hidden rooms within the hotel walls, makeshift living spaces filled with trash, rotting food, and dozens of journals. The writings were disturbing. They described the dreams of guests, conversations he couldn't have possibly heard, and recurring nightmares he claimed to control. Claire started having sleep paralysis. She'd wake up unable to move, a dark figure sitting on her chest. She'd hear him whispering, promising he'd find her again. Management shut the hotel down within weeks. But Claire knew that wouldn't stop him. That kind of evil doesn't need walls. It just needs a way in. In the weeks that followed, Claire's nightmares escalated. She began hearing the same ghostly whispers that guests had once complained about, only now, they followed her home. She'd hear tapping inside her apartment walls at night, always near her bed. Sometimes, her TV would switch on by itself, displaying static with a low, gurgling voice repeating her name. Her once peaceful nights became a string of true scary horror stories, playing out in the dark corners of her mind. Paranormal investigators were called to her home. They confirmed something had followed her from the hotel, something intelligent, something malicious. They documented cold spots, shadow figures caught on camera, and paranormal activity that intensified whenever Claire was asleep. One even claimed to see a figure pressed between the drywall, its face distorted, smiling with too many teeth. Claire moved, twice. But the phenomenon never left. It was as if her encounter had marked her, branded her with a kind of paranormal grip. She tried therapy, spiritual cleansing, even leaving the country for a time, but wherever she went, the nightmares followed. She began to see the man in reflections, standing just behind her, visible for only a second before vanishing. She eventually stopped sleeping altogether. When she did manage to close her eyes, she'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, unable to breathe, the phantom weight of the intruder still pressing on her chest. And worse, she started to see signs that someone was inside her new home, small things out of place, food missing from the fridge, and once, a footprint in the dust behind her bedroom dresser. Claire now lives with all the walls in her home sealed with thick drywall, lined with steel. She doesn't stay in hotels. She doesn't even sit with her back to a wall. And every night, without fail, she plays white noise to drown out the whispers she knows are still there. Because the truth is, not every haunting comes from the dead. Some come from those forgotten in the dark, from the creepy stories no one wants to believe. The ones who watch. The ones who wait. The ones who live inside the walls, and never really leave. These true scary horror stories reveal a chilling truth: not every monster hides under the bed. Some live inside the walls, listening, waiting, watching. From ghostly whispers to paranormal grips, these aren't just haunted tales, they're warnings. If these terrifying encounters gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who sleeps too soundly at night. And next time you hear a tap behind the wall, or a whisper in an empty room, don't assume it's your imagination. It might be someone, or something, that never left. Stay safe. And remember, not all homes are empty when you move in.